Today I'm speaking on behalf of the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality. Obviously, we've been involved in this case since the beginning, and these are obviously startling revelations that have been provided that we've been working on for quite some time. And on the eve of some of the upcoming trials regarding the other individuals who were arrested, we find this to be very significant. One of the photographs we find really interesting, given the fact that on the top of the cap of the individual leaning over Imam Abdullah's body has a hat that says Detroit on the bib of it. Now, we don't know, and we can't say that that definitely is a DPD officer, but we certainly would be interested in finding out if that was the case. Given the fact if that were the case, then the multi-jurisdictional task forces who engage in these activities, then they can come literally from anywhere. And thus the question becomes, how do we hold multi-jurisdictional task forces accountable for their behavior in these kinds of raids? So we're concerned about that, especially in relationship to the city of Detroit's ongoing travail with the consent decrees and use of force. So that's one thing. The second thing is that given the circumstances under which Imam Abdullah died, that having a fractured jaw, the question is we don't know whether or not there was a weapon used, whether he used one or not, but certainly within the context of the legal standard of what a reasonable person would do in a given situation like that, did he, if that happened, have the right to self-defense if in effect he were under attack, and that the use of these dogs was not simply something to actually go in and sniff out ahead of another action. So essentially what's happened now is that, as all have said on the panel, there are more questions than answers. There's more of a need for investigation than not, on the local as well as the national level.
Thank you, Ron. With that, we can take any of your questions, and can be directed to Ron or Attorney Musser.
Just a question for you. You talk about another investigation, that there's been a lack of transparency and all this. It's an ongoing investigation, and a lot of times I find that when you have an ongoing investigation, you don't get the report until the report is finished. So do you feel that that it might be a little bit premature in terms of the fact that you're not getting the report or the answers that you want right now, since this is an ongoing investigation?
Well, the only problem with that is that law enforcement entities have released information to other entities, but not to us. For example, Fox 2 News was given the necropsy report. We've been talking about that necropsy report for months, in which that necropsy report itself was inconclusive because it didn't show what caliber of bullets entered into that FBI attack dog. In regards to the ACLU, they had a Freedom of Information Act request given to them with the Dearborn police in terms of the 911 footage on audio, which basically shows that emergency medical assistance was never called on behalf of the imam. So within this context, we wonder why this information is not being shared with us.
And just as a follow-up, never mind.
No problem.
But you basically do not trust what they're doing. You don't trust Mike Cox or the state police? Well, is that fair to say?
Well, what's fair to say is because a multi-jurisdictional law enforcement task force was involved in this, and it seems that every local state and even the FBI had their hands in regards to the series of raids that took place. And given the fact that Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy asked for information from the FBI so that she could do a thorough investigation, and she was denied, we feel that only the weight of the federal government itself, the Department of Justice, will have access to all the information, and that they are the only ones who can truly do a thorough, robust, independent investigation.
Or Ron, you mentioned, I think Ryan mentioned the issue of self-defense. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because are you saying that it may be the case that Imam Luqman is trying to defend himself because he found himself under attack?
Yeah, I mentioned a legal standard. I mean, this is for you, me, or anybody else, and the question as to whether or not And we're seeing now that it's very interesting in the wake of recent things. We don't know how raids happen, and sometimes when they're going to happen. So the question becomes for you and me and anybody else, how might we defend ourselves in a situation where we may feel threatened? And certainly in this context, now that we're seeing the revelation of these reports in terms of pathology and so on, that the broken jaw indicates that in effect that Imam Luqman may have very well been attacked prior to anything happening, whether he used a gun or whether he didn't. Certainly in that context, the standard would be, by any legal definition, that an individual would have a right to defend his or herself.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, when Congressman Conyers joined you for that news conference a couple of months ago, did he say that that the Attorney General was going to launch an investigation?
No. Well, what was announced previously is that there would be a review once the FBI's shooting results were in, that they would be reviewing to make a determination if a civil rights investigation would take place. None has taken place thus far. We got a letter from the Department of Justice approximately 2 weeks ago stating that they have not yet made the decision if they are going to have a thorough civil rights investigation. I'd like to add on to what Ron said, and given the fact that we know for sure that Imam Luqman was attacked by the canine and that he actually suffered teeth marks and bite marks on his face, most individuals, if they felt this threat of imminent danger of a canine sinking their teeth into their arm, chest, and face, would probably discharge a weapon to get rid of the immediate danger. Now, this is why we need to see the video surveillance footage to see if Imam Luqman was indeed in the process of surrendering when those attack dogs jumped on him, or if he was pointing a gun and firing at FBI agents, which to this date, we find no reason to believe that he brandished a firearm or shot at any human beings.
Do you attach any significance to the fact that it's taken this long? It's 8 months now, and also couple that with the fact that the degree of information that's been provided, as you point out, has been quite inconsistent, that a news organization can have access to it, and an organization such as yours is denied that opportunity.
Well, I'd like to speak to that, having had some experience with law enforcement agencies. The issue is here always as to whether or not information is provided to the public, especially the civil rights organizations like this. It is just amazing, because I know in the past our organization has sought, and you'll remember a long time ago, issues like the Grable case and all of those, spent years trying to get that information. And even lawyers in the case spent numerous amount of hours and times trying to gain discovery in those issues. So I think it's a question in terms of when law enforcement does these, and this is something for you guys really to look into, with the prevalence of more of these kind of raids, in terms of how then does the public, because we're representing our interest as an organization, but how does the public come to know what an agency that spent over 2 years, millions of dollars in this activity, how have they used that money? What's been going on? How have the civil rights of the individuals been affected? And certainly in the context of an organization where you have an imam, a religious leader, whether or not the First Amendment has been abridged. It seems to me that there's no justification for holding on to this. And if certainly, and I'm glad that Fox 2 did get it, but certainly if a news agency can, certainly the family and others, and we as taxpayers have a right to it. So I can't really explain how over the years that we've dealt with law enforcement, that has been the case. It's been this ongoing investigation. And law enforcement agencies have a choice. They can release on a step-by-step basis too. They can release certain components of a case that would not compromise that to the public, and then chose to keep others redacted or otherwise. So even that kind of a report has not been provided.
Can you explain what the pathologists had to look at? What did you give them?
the pathologist